The day before the parole board, the week before the parole board, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. No matter what you say to these people, no matter what you do, they still gonna do what they wanna do. Because at the end of the day, it's a job to them. They go home every day, they have dinner with their family. They don't care about my life.
I'm Carol Shapiro, a former commissioner from the New York State Parole Board. I literally have spent my life trying to keep people out of jail and prison. So being on the parole board was probably one of the most challenging jobs I've ever had. I felt like the first day on the job, I was like, really? This is what I'm doing? I had no idea that we'd be sitting in windowless rooms often for 10 hours a day, no real break for lunch. You know, it's a very archaic paper system. The facility comes the night before and brings all these files, physical files. You prepare literally, we start usually a half hour before the videos start, so we have time to look through our files a little bit. I'm sure if I was there longer, I would do even better job of asking to see the file and things like that. But you're very aware of time. Some of our colleagues felt like, we got to get out of here, you know. It's like assembly line injustice, right? You're doing case after case, you're reviewing files while a colleague is interviewing, you're writing decisions. It's so, what's the word? It's so routinized that I wasn't expecting that.
I feel like I was going through the process, literally just going through a car wash each time. I wanted to be acknowledged in a place that doesn't acknowledge human beings.
You ask me the same questions over and over and over and over and over, and I'm giving you the same answers, but at the same time, you already got your mind made up. It's like, next person, and you feel like, wow, do these people have any heart or compassion or sympathy?
We've created an industry around this. There's not a significant amount of respect afforded to people who are really very nervous. And what is the message if they're doing everything they think they can and they're denied, and the reason for denial isn't clear?
I was surprised that the thing that hurt me the most wasn't even like me. It wasn't even like, you know, wow, they did this to me. I felt like they did this to my family. My daughter at this point is 7 years old. Like, is my dad coming home, right? Like, I can't not tell them that I'm eligible for parole. So like, she has the expectation that like my dad is coming home, because they still feel that the system is just, right? They still feel that the system is going to look at me in my totality and see my actions and make a decision based on that, and not a decision based on something I can't change. So it's especially harmful for them. It's especially painful for them.
The role of the family and community in our criminal legal system is non-existent. When people are sentenced to exorbitant time in cages, and they have wives, they have children, they have communities that becomes disenfranchised further because of their absence.
We don't really talk about the impact on children, loss of income. Phone calls are expensive, visiting even worse. You know, we don't think about those things, and that's eroding our communities.
First time I had a fear hearing in this entire process was with my immigration case, where they actually they allowed my family to be in the room, right? So like they were able to see my family, to hear my grandmother talk about the impact of me being away for 7 years, to hear, you know, like my daughter's mom talk about the impact of me not being a father for 7 years, but how I was able to still co-parent with her through letters, through phone calls, through visits. They were able to hear my mom talk about how hard it was for her to go to bed at night, not knowing whether I was safe. You know, and these things were able to really show my humanity in ways that the parole system had never afforded me.
We hear the slogan all the time, don't let the time do you, you do the time. And what I presented for my first parole board, if anything else, showed that I was on that path. I've been through this whole transformation, taken these programs, educated myself, published, and I'm not saying that all these awards or all these acknowledgments that I've been able to achieve is an automatic pass, right? But I like to believe it's indicative of the journey that I took, and I get denied parole for the nature of the crime.
The reason why I got denied was the nature of my offense. It wasn't like, hey, we feel that it would be really good if you worked on this. It would be really good if you got this vocational certificate. It was just, no, you're denied because of the nature of your offense.
The first thing they go into, they look at the crime, because they asked me questions from 1997 when I got locked up, and I'm like, are you serious?
A common problem since approximately 1995 has been a high rate of repeated parole denials based on the severity or nature of the crime that was committed. This trend began during the tough on crime policies of the mid-1990s. These policies led to the end of work release programs for incarcerated people with violent felony convictions, and it also signaled to the parole board that anyone convicted of a violent felony should not be released.
Everything that we knew told us that people that went out on work release were less likely to recidivate down the line. We knew even violent felons have the lowest recidivism rate of all crimes. That didn't matter. It worked better, you know, as a talking point for the governor to say, you know, tough on crime, let's keep people in. We don't want violent felons out on our streets.
There were no questions as to who I was. The questions predominantly focused on the crime of that I pled to and maybe the crimes that I didn't plead to. They just wanted me to tell them how much of a monster I was.
It seemed very disrespectful to the people we were interviewing. And it isn't a matter of how many minutes or hours you spend with them, it's how you treat them. And I felt that there's not a significant amount of respect afforded to people who are really very nervous.
I did what I did. I made a bad decision, you know, I'm not gonna say mistakes, because, you know, we in control of the decisions we make, 9 of the time. So I would say bad decisions and choice making. And then you still gonna sit here and say, oh, well, you did this in 97, this, that, and the third. They said you did this, you displayed firearm, things of that nature. I paid 18 years of my life for that crime. Why you still bringing that up? How can I undo that?
The reliance of the nature of the crime by the parole board for denying people's application for parole is, I think, wrong thinking when you consider that the nature of the crime will never change.
Way too much focus on the incident offense and an antiquated PSI, pre-sentence investigation report. Those are static factors. And what I learned is that the purpose of parole in New York State is very murky. I really do believe in presumptive parole. I believe that we should not be resentencing. We have an addiction to punishment in this country, and I feel like New York is really on top of that list.
The parole board should be a prospective looking body. They should be looking at what was done after the commission of the crime, because the person who was sentenced, let's say to a 2 to 6 year sentence, that is what the judge and the jury felt you needed to serve in order to pay for your crime. That's not a minimum of sentencing, and then the parole board has the opportunity to keep increasing that sentence. They're supposed to be looking at, are you adjusting? Have you improved your behavior? Did you take the programs? Have you gotten your education? If you've done those things, you should be granted parole.
I have a disciplinary record that is excellent, but that is still not enough. I have letters and recommendations from my family members, and it's still not enough. To be again denied in an interview that was really hostile, right? Like an interview again that didn't seek to know who I was, that didn't seek to understand why I got there, but just again wanted me to confess to crimes. And it was really just like dehumanized, and it destroyed me. Like I felt destroyed. I left there feeling destroyed. I left there feeling, I didn't even get the decision, and I knew that I didn't make the board because of the way they spoke to me.
It felt as if they had the authority to just open me up, to look at that one critical moment in my life and to make a judgment on it, right? A moment that was 25 years at that point, and to make a judgment on and who I was at then.
If I'm denied for the one thing that I cannot change, what am I going to do in the next 2.5 years? Like, what can I possibly do in the next 2.5 years that I haven't already done? At 18 years old, I was arrested under the Rockefeller drug laws, and I was a first-time offender, never been in trouble before, and was actually in college studying criminal justice of all things. And when I was arrested, I became a number, I became an object. No one cared to know my story. My humanity was totally lost. When I went to prison in 1994, my number was 94A 6325. 94A 6325. 94 meant the year. A meant that I went to maximum security prison for reception, and 6325 meant that I was the 6,325th person to be processed. I was deloused, I was shaved, I was, dehumanized in any imaginable way, and that was my introduction. I don't feel many people who are introduced to such an inhumane system actually believe that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I knew very well that there was a possibility that I would not make it home alive.
I remember clearly being in a cell. Might have been like the first week. And what was really scary was that I felt comfortable inside the cell. And I thought that was very scary. Like, how could I feel okay here locked up?
To me, the inhumanity of this is so excessive, and it starts from arrest. There's really a lack of respect, and showing and allowing people to have dignity in this broken system. And it eviscerates people. Being nobody, being a number. Oftentimes people would come into an interview and you'd say, I would say, my name is Carol Shapiro, I'm a member of the parole board, can you state your name, please? And they would state their number first.
You go to parole board, say it's like Monday or Tuesday, and usually you don't get the parole board decisions till 3 days later, 2 or 3 days later. And I can't explain to you the level of anxiety in those 2 days.
Usually I'll go to parole, and within a day, sometimes 2 days later, they'll give me my decision says denied. And then on the third day, the facility expected me to go right back to program, no problem. Like, oh, you got denied? No problem. Go back to work.
The little hope that was built up, the little dreams that were built up, have just been crushed. And it's like you just got resentenced. It's like you just got stabbed. It's like you just got shot. It's like your mother just died. It's like all those things.
People are convicted of offenses and we put them into a prison or jail that bullies and doesn't act fairly and have due process. I'm not sure that, the punitive way that plays out is the best way to get people to feel a part of a community and feel that the community has their interests and humanity, at the forefront.
I had a college degree and I had all types of accolades, yet they had never demonstrated to me that seeing me and my humanity was of any significance.
One parole board, the lady was telling me, yeah, well, you can say whatever you want, but we going by what we see here and with your record and this and that and the third. I'm like, you guys is only going by what's on paper, but you not living my experience in here. You know what I mean? Like, until you can actually, be on the inside looking out, you really don't understand the pain and suffering, the trials and tribulations, the losses we take, and the abuse we have to be subject to. I lost my mother being incarcerated. I became hopeless and helpless and felt like, you know what, these people never gonna let me out. That was just the type of state of mind that I was in.
They have plans to go home. Many of them have family members. Not everybody, but they may have someone else in their life who could be a support going home. And that's what we should be focused on, not what happened 15, 20 years ago.
I go into really a deep depression. At this point, it's like, I mean, this is the first time in my life I thought about suicide because I don't know what else to do.
I'm talking to family members and they're the ones crying more. And I have to take care of them emotionally because they're concerned about my safety, my health, right? My mental capability, stability, I like to believe I got it all together and then nothing really psychologically, got destroyed. But I'm still a human being.
Fundamental to our parole system is whether or not we believe in human capacity to change. Men and women who have been convicted and who are doing time for very serious offenses really do a lot of work to transform themselves. And it is their hope that those around them see that, acknowledge that, and recognize that the offenses that they committed sometimes decades in the past really became a springboard to a different trajectory in their lives.
I had participated in college before college was discontinued. I had started programs that would help young people in the society and community to better their lives through access to us, men who had been incarcerated, who could potentially share their narratives, their stories, their experiences as a way to help them make better decisions. So I felt really good about my chances of parole. And the parole hearing was like a slap in the face. I've done everything that they consider warranted of me, and that's still not enough.
Lines are drawn in the sand for different commissioners. You know, they say they're open-minded, but that is not what I found the case to be. I think people have very strong opinions, particularly around law enforcement, heinous crimes against law enforcement, even if it was not premeditated. You know, I walked into a room, and I know it was not supposed to be like this, but I walked into a room thinking this person's going home, unless there's a reason I can figure out. But you know, it's a team effort. It's not like I can't singularly release somebody. It takes two. You really do believe someone's ready to go home, and your colleagues are like, I can't do it. And it's painful. It's very painful.
If you see someone in front of you who have done all of the things that the system has asked of them and have even gone beyond that, and even those individuals don't make their board appearances and get to go home to their families, it becomes very hard to incentivize for people to do well in prison.
When I went, I was with another guy, and he said he had went to the board 7 times and got denied. And he refused. He said, let me sign a paper, I'm out of here. And I'm looking at him, I'm saying, oh my God, you're not even gonna give yourself a chance to go home? And he said, man, listen, this is my 7th board. They not letting me out.
After being been to the parole board 4 to 5 times, I don't realize it, but there's an anger growing inside of me. I wanted to be acknowledged in a place that doesn't acknowledge human beings. I wanted to feel like people see what I've been doing and that I can make a contribution. I knew the kind of questions they were typically going to ask, right? And I think during that time period where I started getting resentful of the parole board process, I was very mechanical about my answers. So this time I went into it, determined to create a discussion. If I wanted to be accessible or open to people, and I think a lot of times at one point I thought the openness simply meant me being vulnerable, right? But it also means just being open to have a true dialogue, a true exchange, right? And I went in there with that attitude. And surprisingly enough, it was received. I like to believe that's what changed the outcome.
What I expected from day one was people to show up and see my humanity and to really understand how I got there and to weigh those decisions. I wanted to be accountable. I never not wanted to be accountable in this system, but accountability was never afforded to me in a real way. The system never gave me any guidance. It never gave me any type of blueprint towards what I could do to better myself.
I didn't care that they denied me 3 times. I'm looking at it like every chance I go, I'm at least giving myself a fighting chance of getting out. When I received the decision, that was like the most emotional part for me, because when you got the time that I had and did what, went through what I went through all these years and lost family members and finally getting a chance to be a free man again, it was unbelievable, very emotional.
They always say, and dudes tell you this as soon as you come in, you know the ways of the system as soon as you come in. If it's a thick envelope, it usually means that you got denied because there are appeal papers in there. So it's a thick envelope. If you made it, it's usually just like a sheet. So it's like a thin paper, and it just tells you like, congratulations. Nothing has ever superseded this moment for me. Am I going to get out? Am I going to get out? You can't not think about it. You get the envelope, and it's thick. It's thick. And you know that you're not going home.
My name is Karen Murtaugh. I'm the Executive Director of Prisoners Legal Services of New York. So when they're thrown into solitary and not given due process, when they're not given their mental health care, when they're held in jail and prison longer than they should be, all of those issues are issues that Prisoners Legal Services addresses. Parole has always been a difficult area in which to prevail. The way the regulations and the statute were drafted and still are drafted leave so much discretion up to the board of parole, the commissioners that make those decisions. And for the people that ultimately do get into court, the only thing a judge can do under the statute is to send it back for a new parole hearing. He or she cannot order the immediate release of a person from prison. So it all goes back to the discretion of the parole board.
If one is being fair to parole commissioners, and I want to think that the reason they rely so heavily on the nature of the crime is because there are so many areas in which there are gaps in our prison system. And I want to be fair to them and say that they're just not being punitive for the sake of being punitive, but perhaps we need to examine our prison system to see what opportunities to rehabilitate and transform exist there.
I think we need to look at our parole statute. We need to change the statute and the regulations to provide counsel at parole hearings, because people are not entitled to have lawyers at their parole hearings, which is a huge problem. We have a number of people that go to prison that are uneducated, can't read and write, speak Spanish as their dominant language or another language, so they're non-English speaking, suffer from mental illness or drug addiction. The fact that they do not have a legal representative there to hold their hand, to speak to the board about their accomplishments and why that person should be paroled is really a tragedy.
So there was nothing in place to help me make the best presentation possible. I mean, you have that in society now. People applying for jobs. You got job interview trainings and you know, all other kind of trainings. So that way, leadership trainings and communication trainings. You had all these other things to help a person put themselves in the best position possible. And you're expecting someone who never even had that kind of background in their lives to do that at a critical moment.
The people who have the parole preparation project or people who have attorneys come with beautiful packets, and they're much more prepared for an interview. And my feeling is that we need to do a better job for everybody in preparing for a parole interview. Just like you maybe get prepared on how to do a job interview. You know, if you have a technical skill, they tell you how to, you know, I'm not sure what goes on in the institution.
Lawyers should be involved at the very beginning, explaining to people, this is how you will be paroled down the road. These are the things you need to do to ensure your parole release. When you go to prison and they suggest that you take a program, That's not a suggestion. You should take the program. You should get your education if you're able to. You should do everything you can to stay out of trouble, and if you get in trouble, you should contact Prisoners Legal Services so they can represent you on that issue to get it expunged off your record, because when you go before the parole board, they look at all of that to determine whether to parole you. We need to provide competent counsel at the parole hearings and on administrative appeal, to mandate timely preparation of transcripts so you have time to even challenge it, to take away the discretion of the board to consider the crime as a primary reason for not paroling you.
We have to follow the statutes, obviously, but we don't have to follow it in like color by number, right? Like, you know, instead of starting with the crime, how about tell me something you're proud of that you've accomplished? Our job really should be to put people at ease. It's an interview, it's not a hearing.
Clearly, we're starting to look at this a little differently. Over the past, I would say 10 years, we have seen a slow increase in the release rates. Every single year it's gone up, and every single year it's gone up a little more.
The work that the Correctional Association does is very personal to me because I was first introduced to the Correctional Association while serving a 25-year-to-life sentence in New York State prisons. I know what it's like to be in the system. I know what it's like to have the power of the state against you. And I have a profound desire to make people, every people, all people, feel as if they have equity in the communities in which they live. And making sure that our government never loses the fact that it gets its mandate from the people. That it does not operate in a vacuum, that it does not operate just for the privilege. It operates with the consent and the mandate of the people, all of its people.